Hey, welcome back guys. Let's get these motors on, okay? Because we just finished building our frame and now it's time to go ahead and put the motors on and the ESC, the electronic speed controller. So we have a couple motors already out that I set aside here. Other one is somewhere in the bag. Or not in the bags. Yeah, I mean, they're in the bag, but somewhere in the box here. And you obviously will have 4 motors. 2 of them will be clockwise and 2 of them will be counterclockwise motors. And right now you can already tell a difference between the 4 of them, or the 2 groups. So these 2 have black nuts on them and they screw clockwise. So opposite than what you're used to. I mean, they screw clockwise to come off, counterclockwise to go on. So if you notice, you can also see CCW, obviously counterclockwise, the Tyro 119. The other 2 have the silver nuts on them and they spin like, or they come off like normal, righty tighty, lefty loosey. And made in China. And they are labeled as CW clockwise. I already went ahead and wrote on my paper here which ones are the clockwise and which ones are the counterclockwise. So your motor position are as follows. You got your clockwise in your front right, clockwise in your bottom left, and counterclockwise on the other ones, the front left and the right bottom. Okay, so let's set those aside. Let's just do one at a time. These are the motors. You notice that there's 4 slots for screws, but we only have 3 of them here on the arm. So we're just gonna use 3. We're gonna make sure that the wires go this way off of them. Obviously you don't want it pointed this way and then try to route the wires like that, right? So make it easy on yourself. We have to use 3, 6, 9, 12 screws. We obviously don't have enough of these littler ones or smaller ones or shorter ones. So obviously that means we're gonna have to use these ones. So you have 2 groups of screws left to pick from. Choose the one that's a little bit taller. You can see the slight difference here. I'll put a screenshot of these on the video and you guys can see, okay? So a couple things I want to do before I get started here is I also want to, my plan is to use heat shrink tubing to heat shrink these together once I've soldered them to the ESC. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to cut some back, but if I do, I will. But yeah, obviously you don't want to forget this if you want to do it. So put it on now, because once you solder, you can't put it back on unless you unsolder or cut the wires and put them back on. So anyway, put that there. Oh, and then also I want to Loctite these motors on because, you know, I work in quality, right? And one of the things we always check for are what could go wrong. And one thing that could go wrong with these motors is that you have a lot of vibration and you definitely don't want the screws to come loose, right? So I'll just put some blue Loctite here in a cap. This is the removable kind, in case you ever want to remove them and use different motors. And you can always get the red kind if you really want to have it permanent. There, a little dab will do it, just like that on the tip. Make sure you shake up the Loctite before you use it. And you're going to want to use, or you're going to want to screw them into the, you see how it's like a little bit of a slot here? Put the screws in the first slot or the first holes there. Yeah, I'm gonna put this in first, like that. Make sure I have it oriented right. And screw it in. Let's make sure it's not cross-threaded. These screw heads are the same size as what you use for the frame. Shouldn't be any different. I just have a screwdriver this time. It was a little bit easier than using a Allen wrench. Dip her in there like that. The next one on. That one does not seem to be grabbing. Let's go ahead and loosen the other ones up maybe. Try to reposition that in there. There we go. Now it's grabbing the threads of the motor. So don't get it too tight at once. Keep them all loose and then tighten them at the very end. And I'm not gonna like really tighten them down, just nice and snug with the finger. you got the Loctite on there, you should be okay. And make sure that the screws do not protrude all the way up into these windings here, because you don't want to ruin those, cause any sparks or anything. So, okay, so that's one motor. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest, and we'll come back and show you how to solder it onto the ESC. Okay, all motors are on now. I hope that went smoothly for you as it did for me. Everything looks good here. So all 3 screws for each motor. Got a little carried away with the Loctite there, but we'll be fine with that, okay? We'll go ahead and slap a couple more sleeves on these wires so that they're ready to go when I'm heat shrinking them. And if you want to know what size I had, it's the 3/16 inch size heat shrink tubing. Something I just picked up at Lowe's. You could just grab it off Amazon, but I was in a hurry, so I just went to the store and grabbed it real quick. Okay, good. All right, front of the drone. I got my Sharpie here because I keep getting confused, or it takes me a second to find out which one's the home or the head of the drone. So I was gonna write H here, or let's just draw an arrow. So the arrow here is the front of the drone. So I can use that as a reference now all the time, at least. And that'll get covered up by other stuff anyway, so you won't even see it. So anyway, I got the ESC out of the box already. Oh, and here we are, we're touching electronics now. It comes in a anti-static ESD, electrostatic discharge safe bag here. I got my ESD vest on, or my ESD jacket on, getting all professional here, right? And I am touching this, and make sure you got ESD shoes on too. I'm not sure if it's like static sensitive or not, but a lot of people are touching it and it seems like there aren't any issues. So anyway, this is your ESC. It's going to be positioned in this way, not this way. So it'll get put on like this, and you can also see here that you've got tiny numbers in the corners, right? So this one says 1, 2, 3, 3 and 4, right? Sorry about that. I cut the video because I went to go get my safety glasses, because I'm safety oriented, right? We're about to do some soldering, and so we should be protecting ourselves as best we can. Here is the ESC. It's going to be placed backwards, I guess, if you call it backwards, on the drone here. This is the front of the drone. This is the back of the drone. Hey guys, I'm coming to you from the future. You should actually place your ESC as shown in this diagram here that I got off of the Betaflight software. So your pin 1 should go in your bottom right corner of the drone, and then everything else will follow suit there. If you do it the other way around, then you're going to have to play in software to get the right motor output programmed. So just to save a little bit of time, do it this way. Otherwise, you'll have to just play around with the software to get your motors remapped. And the capacitor here, which is used to filter out all of the noise from the battery whenever the drone is functioning and sending signals to the motors, is pointed in the rear position. So the way the motors are going to get soldered onto this, let me take this out real quick, is you have 3 wires obviously, and you have a section of 3 here, 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 and here. So this motor here will get soldered to these pads, and the way the orientation, or the way I'm going to do it is, you can see that there are the 3 wires come out of the motor flat and flush like this. I'm just going to do this this wire to the first hole, this one to the middle hole, and this one to the last hole. First hole, middle hole, last. You can also see that they're holes, they're through holes, they're meant to have a wire through them and soldered that way. I've seen some people just slap a bunch of solder in there, slap a bunch of solder on the wire, and then just solder it on top of the pad. That makes 0 sense. I don't know, like these guys don't have any electronic background, I guess, but the wire should go up through the hole and then soldered that way, just like you see a through-hole component, okay? So that's how we're going to do it. That's the best robust way. There is an IPC-A-610 international standard that teaches you or shows you how you should solder, or and the quality of that solder, what it should look like in order for it to be an acceptable solder joint. Also, since I work in quality, we look to mitigate risks, find risks, find problems that could happen and prevent them before they start. We're gonna take our pliers here real quick, and I'm just going to bend them up like about 90 degrees. They are already pre-tinned as well. So, yep, I have this butane one I picked up at Lowe's as well. I've had it for a while now, and I like it because you can just refill it. It's portable. It's not, yeah, if you can hear that, that means you're rolling. Okay. And we got flux. Flux is important. I see a lot of other people not using flux, maybe because their solder has flux in it, but in electronic soldering, we use flux because it helps the solder flow better, and solder is going to flow wherever the heat goes, and that's what the flux kind of helps you get. So take a little bit of that and just dab it onto the pads. Flux is your friend. Let's just verify. I'm going to feel the wires to make sure I do have the right wire in the right location. Yep, these are all flat. Once I get this solder on, then I will heat shrink this. So I'm using the quadcopter's standoffs here to hold the ESC in place. Not a bad idea. Use what you got, right? I'm just going to go ahead and solder that in now. I'm going to touch the pad and the wire, heat up everything, and then I'm going to hold it there a little bit so that the solder can flow down through the through hole. Now that's what your solder joint should look like. Let's do the other ones. Okay, take a look at it. And you know you did a good job when you also see solder coming out the other side as well. I pulled the ESC out of there just so I could get this to stretch over and get a much better solder joint, or get the wire up through the hole better to get a better solder joint. Yep, that's getting hot. Okay, there we go. Okay, there you have it. Our first motor is done. Make sure you also don't get any solder bridging on the other side. If you got solder that came all the way through the pad like I did, which is good, and it's okay, just make sure you don't have any solder bridging on these chips as well. That is what my solder joints look like. They look pretty good to me. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest off camera, and I'll come back and show you guys what it looks like. Okay guys, I hope that went very smooth for you. I realized that there's a setting that I bumped earlier. That's why I was struggling a little bit on the first time I was soldering all three of those wires. So I needed to turn it all the way up to the 4th setting, which is the highest setting. And then once I did that, the joints started to come out really well. So there's what my solder joints look like. Make sure they're shiny, they're not cracked, they're not dull. So now let's go ahead and heat shrink the motor cables. This is probably the easiest part. It's getting hot. Okay. This one here, you can see that I actually cut it because I really needed to stretch the wire a little bit to get it to fit on these 3 pads here. The other ones were fine, but I didn't want to risk breaking a wire or breaking a solder joint, so I just went ahead and just trimmed it or cut the wire a little bit. I like the heat shrink tubing because it just makes everything look a lot cleaner and nicer looking. I mean, what do you guys think? Does it look good? So if you're wondering where I got this Tyro 119 drone, got it from RDQ, Romeo Delta Quebec, aka Steak Pots. All right, I think it's looking pretty good. I think that looks pretty good. We're gonna hold this up here a little bit. Those are all looking good. I'll let that cool down a little bit. And what I'm going to do later then, so I'm going to zip tie them to the front, but it's too hot to kind of deal with right now. Right now, let's solder on our battery terminal wire. You're going to need this bag of wires, wire harnesses, I guess we'll call it. That is what they're called. And get out the battery terminal 1. Here we go. Now, if you see this, you'll notice that you have a positive and a negative terminal, right? Obviously, red associated with positive, black associated with negative. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and bend these up like we did the motor ones. We'll go through this way then. How about that? How about this second square? Even better then. Okay. Just make sure those are pulled all the way up to the top. I'm gonna move my capacitor back since I bumped it. Let's hope you guys can get a really good view of that. I'm just gonna, while this iron is heating up, I'm just gonna put it on the wire and the pad just to also get that heated up as well. Oh, let's add flux. All right, flux is added. Push that black wire up in there a little bit better. Red wire too. Okay, let's see if this is still heating up. Now it's really. Here it's really important that you get it really hot all over and get it all across the pad. And then I pull the tip up to draw the solder up through the lead. Basically, you just hold the iron in one place and add your solder. Ouch, burn your finger too. How about that? Hold it a little bit, get it nice and warm. Pull it straight up. That looks better. Okay, there you have it. Those are my two battery terminal solder joints. Nice and shiny, good solder fillet. And yeah, that wire's not coming out of there. So there you have it, guys. That is how you solder the motors to the ESC, and that's also how you install the motors. After this, the next video will be to install the cabling and the flight control computer, okay? So tune in to that video. We'll see you next time.